Hi and welcome to another GC Mysteries video, where this time we are looking at the mystery behind El Chapo. Okay, so El Chapo, I think we all know that name now. Chapo means shorty in Spanish. Now, the reason why I've called this video The Mystery of El Chapo is because with his mind, his knowledge of engineering, and the fact that he's used brilliant engineering techniques to escape from prison twice, so it's kind of a mystery of, well, why did he go down the path of being a drug lord and being a murderer and a drug trafficker, and all of the crimes that he's committed. Now, I will read all of them crimes out, but he could have still made the millions or billions, but legitimately. Now, we all know that engineering is a good line of work to be in. It doesn't matter what country you're from. Engineering is a good line of work to be in. And he seems to have picked up the knowledge of engineering from basically nowhere, thin air. And so the mystery in this is, why didn't he make his millions or billions but do it legally? He didn't have to go down the murdering route and the drug trafficking route. He could have done it properly. And of course, if he'd done it properly, he would be free now. Now, El Chapo's full name is Joaquín Archivaldo Guzmán Loera. Now, that's Spanish. We all know that for some reason in Mexico they speak Spanish, but it still sometimes gets called Mexican. I don't know why it's not. It's Spanish, but there you are. Now, he is 5'6" tall, hence why he has been known as El Chapo, the shorty. But I will go through his full profile, and then I'll go through the crimes and stuff like that. Now, he's also been known as El Rapido. Now, we all know that rapid means speedy or quick. Rapido is the Spanish spelling of that and the Spanish pronunciation of that, but it does say speedy. Now, he is a Mexican former drug lord and former leader of the Sinaloa cartel, which was an international crime syndicate. Now, he is considered to have been the most powerful drug trafficker in the world. Now, he was born in Sinaloa and raised in a poor farming family. Now, he actually endured physical abuse at the hands of his own father. Might be why he was so brutal. Not an excuse for it. Don't condone any of the crimes that he's done. I'm not making excuses, but maybe that's where he got it from, and maybe why he didn't care, because it happened to him, so he doesn't care if it happens to somebody else. However, he also entered the drug trade through his father, helping him grow marijuana, or weed for anyone who knows it better by its common names, or cannabis. But that was for local dealers during his early adulthood. He actually began working with Hector Luis Palma Salazar by the late 1970s, one of the nation's rising drug lords. He helped Salazar map routes to move drugs through Sinaloa and into the United States, and later supervised logistics for Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, who was one of the nation's leading kingpins in the mid-1980s. Now, El Chapo actually founded his own cartel in 1988. That was after Gallardo's arrest. And he oversaw operations where mass cocaine, methamphetamines and marijuana, cannabis, weed and heroin were produced, smuggled into and distributed throughout the United States and Europe, the world's largest users. Now, he achieved this by pioneering the use of distribution cells and long-range tunnels near borders. Now, this gets me back to, why didn't he go down the legal route, be an engineer and do it properly, because obviously he had to have some knowledge, but that enabled him to export more drugs to the United States than any other trafficker in history. And El Chapo's leadership of the cartel also brought immense wealth and power. Now, Forbes ranked him as one of the most powerful people in the world between 2009 and 2013, when the Drug Enforcement Administration, or the DEA, estimated that he matched the influence and wealth of Pablo Escobar. But Al Chapo's first capture, or when he was first captured, was way back in 1993 in Guatemala, and he was extradited and sentenced to 20 years in prison in Mexico for murder and drug trafficking. However, he bribed prison guards and escaped from a federal maximum security prison in 2001. His status as a fugitive resulted in an $8.8 million combined reward from the Mexico and the US for information leading to his capture, and he was arrested in Mexico in 2014. So that's 13 years that he had been a fugitive, never arrested. So he knew how to hide well, as well as having the engineering knowledge. He knew how to hide. He hid for 13 years and avoided arrest. Now, in 2015, I believe, he escaped prior to formal sentencing through a tunnel under his jail cell. So that just proves he had to have had blueprints, or had to have ordered his people to get blueprints to the prison to find out exactly which cell he was in and tunnel under. Otherwise he wouldn't have got out. So we know he had a lot of power, but that proves a lot of power to order and get his people to tunnel under the jail directly to his cell. Now, Mexican authorities recaptured him following a shootout in 2016 and extradited him to the US a year later. Now, in 2019, he was found guilty of a number of criminal charges related to his leadership of the Sinaloa cartel, and he is currently serving a life sentence at ADX Florence. Now, for those of you that don't know what ADX Florence is, it is a super secure max jail in Fremont County, near Florence, Colorado, and that is a federal US prison. However, it didn't quite get as long as was expected, and I will obviously give you his sentence and stuff like that, but it was actually Mexico that formally launched a renewed process of extradition to the United States 2 days after he was recaptured on the 8th of January 2016 after his second prison escape. Now, El Chapo's lawyers mounted numerous and creative injunctions to prevent extradition, but this is just one show of power he got, or what he had, and that is that Vicente Antonio Bermudez Zacarias was a federal judge involved in El Chapo's extradition proceedings, and he would have been the one to sign on the dotted line for El Chapo to be extradited to the US, and for signing on that dotted line and just doing his job. He was assassinated on the 17th of October 2016 whilst jogging near Mexico City. Now, some of the places in the United States where El Chapo was wanted were Chicago, San Diego, New York City, New Hampshire, Miami and Texas. And that's in addition to having indictments in at least 7 different US federal courts. Now, the charges that he had against him were drug trafficking with intent to distribute, conspiracy association, organised crime against health, money laundering, homicide, illegal possession of firearms, kidnapping and murder in Chicago, Miami, New York and other cities. Now, a critical requirement for extradition to the US, though, was that they had to guarantee that they would not sentence El Chapo to death if he were found guilty of the homicide charges. And on the 19th of January 2017, he was extradited to the US and to face the charges and turned over to the custody of the HSI and DEA agents. And during his time before his court case and things like that, he was housed at the maximum security wing of the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York, located specifically in Manhattan. El Chapo actually pled not guilty on the 20th of January to a 17-count indictment in the United States District Court in New York, and US District Judge Brian Colgan scheduled his trial for the 5th of November 2018 when jury selection began. And such is El Chapo's power even at that time, that the judge agreed after prosecutors insisted that jurors must remain anonymous and an armed escort are necessary even if El Chapo is in isolation due to his history of having jurors and witnesses murdered. Now, the judge agreed to keep jurors anonymous and to have El Chapo transported to and from the court by US Marshals and sequestered from the public while in the courthouse. Now, sequestered is just a posh word for basically being hidden or isolated. And would have meant, I believe, that he would have been literally in the dock rather than sitting at the table with his lawyers. Now, it's not clear if there were screens around El Chapo that stopped him from being able to even see the public and the jurors. That's not clear at all, but he was isolated from them. Opening arguments began on Tuesday the 13th of November, and closing arguments took place on the 31st of January 2019. Inevitably, El Chapo was found guilty of all counts on the 12th of February 2019 and was sentenced on the 17th of July 2019. Now, he will never see another day out of a prison again unless he somehow manages to get his people to tunnel him out again. But even so, the sentence I thought was pretty lenient considering all of his crimes. He was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years and ordered to forfeit more than $12.6 billion. So he wasn't actually sentenced to as long as I thought he would. I've actually seen murderers, and I mean murderers that have just committed one murder. I've seen them be sentenced to life without parole. So the fact that El Chapo was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years, he'll never see the light of day again. But it still begs the question of why the sentence for such a man was so lenient. But as I said, he is now serving his sentence at ADX Florence, which again is the nation's most secure supermax prison, and that's a federal prison in the United States. Now, there is plenty more on El Chapo, and we'd be here all night into the early hours if I went through it all, but you can find out more about El Chapo just by searching El Chapo. Now, Chapo, it's just one P. It's not double P, it's CHAPO. And obviously L is just EL. But you will be able to learn more about him, more about his family, in fact, more about his life, both in and out of prison. Now, as I said, if I was to go through it all, we would be here for hours, and in fact it would take even longer for you to actually see this video. But there's a lot more images that you can find on him. A lot more info. In fact, there is even an Instagram, which, when researching more on El Chapo I found. So there's even an Instagram you can go through, but just search his name, you'll find more. Thank you for watching this GC Mysteries video. If you liked it, please like, subscribe and click the notification bell. If you can, support us on Patreon at patreon.com/GC Mysteries. See us on Facebook and Twitter, GC Mysteries, and bye bye for now.